Hi everyone, welcome back to groCTO by Typo. This is Kovid, your host, wishing you all a very happy new year. Today we are kicking off this year's groCTO podcast journey with the first episode of 2025, hoping to make it even better, even more insightful for all the listeners out there. And today, for the first episode, we have our special guest, Maher Hanafi. He's a VP of engineering at Betterworks, comes with 16 plus years of engineering and leadership experience. Well, welcome to the show, Meher.
Thank you, Kovid. Thank you for having me and Happy New Year.
Same to you, man. All right. So, Meher, today we're going to talk about some engineering productivity hacks from a VP's perspective. But before we jump on to our main discussion, I think there is a lot to know about you. And to start off, we would like to know something about you that your resume or your LinkedIn profile doesn't tell. Something from your childhood, which was very eventful and then defines you today. So, would you like to take the stage and tell us about yourself?
Well, that's a great way to start the conversation. Thank you for asking this. Yeah, it's not something that is on my resume and my bio, but people who know me know this. So I'm into gaming, and I used to play video games a lot when I was a kid, to the point that I wanted my career to be in gaming. So I have a telecommunication background, engineering background, and then as soon as I finished that and I was ready to go to the market to start working, I decided to completely go and pursue a career in gaming. So what I did is I looked into the game developer jobs, and I figured out everything they need to have to be hired as a game developer. And I learned that. I taught myself these things. And 2 years later, I was working for Electronic Arts. So the great story there is like this passion I had as a kid for many years led me to go into and pursue that career. Another part of that same story, as a gamer, I used to play a lot of massive multiplayer online video games like MMOs. One of the biggest one is World of Warcraft. And at that time, I used to play the game a lot to the point that I was a guild master, meaning I was leading a big team, hundreds of people, telling them, kind of a leadership position. So, in other words, I was a manager before I even start my career as an engineer, or before I become an engineering manager later. So that taught me a lot of things from social intelligence and how you manage people and how you hire and fire and kind of manage productivity and performance, which will be the topic of today. So happy to go into that later in a moment.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I think before you even started off your leadership journey, you were actually leading a team, though it was just gamers, but still it must have taught you a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I learned a lot and I'm so grateful to that experience. And a lot of what I did there are things I brought to my career and I used as a manager to get to the of engineering level.
Perfect. I think it's time. Let's move on to something which is around the topic. And before again we jump onto that, tell us something about Betterworks, your role and responsibility as a VP of engineering over there. How is it like at Betterworks?
Yeah, so Betterworks, we are an enterprise a SaaS company. So we develop an enterprise performance management software for global big companies. All the tools and suite of tools they need to manage performance internally for big companies. Again, this is more challenging when you have departments and team and business units and like you're just globally distributed. Managing performance in general is very challenging. So we build and provide all these tools for our big customers. I'm currently the VP of engineering. I lead all our engineering teams. We're split between India and the US. And yeah, I do different things. Obviously, lead the technical perspective from a vision and strategy and architecture, help the team make the right decisions, build the right software. And also, I contribute a lot to our strategy over time and vision, including AI. So this was one of the most recent, kind of areas of focus of mine to help the team and the company deliver generative AI integrations and features, enhanced features on top of what we offer, which is obviously very kind of important these days to be on top of that and deliver. So that's what I do. And again, as a VP of engineering, there's a lot of things that get into that, including managing the team, managing productivity, ensuring that everything is being efficient and effective and having an impact.
Talking about productivity and efficiency, I think I was just stalking your profile, and like I was talking you on LinkedIn, and I realized like you have had this good journey from being a developer and then manager and then leader, right? I would want to understand how your perspective towards improving team efficiency and team productivity has changed while you were working as a manager and now working as a VP. Like your perspective has changed.
Yeah, I mean, working as a, going from an IC to a manager is one thing. Is like going from this, you hear this a lot, going from being a player to being a coach, maybe captain slash coach. So you have your scope, which is small. Usually you have your team, which is also usually small. The areas of expertise in terms of like stack and technology is also small most of the time. So when I start my journey as a manager, I was managing mobile teams and mobile development teams. So that was my area of expertise when I turned into management. But then when you get into more like senior management and director of engineering and then VP of engineering, your scope is growing and you be turned more horizontal than vertical, right? Like your depth of expertise gets kind of get to a certain level where you cannot go any deeper if you want to manage bigger teams. And add to that, you get involved into managing managers and you become like a coach of coaches. So the whole dynamics change over time and your areas of focus change and you become less hands-on, less technical, but still you need to keep up with things that are happening. If you go online and search for VP of engineering, you find a lot of people saying that VP of engineering is like the hardest job in the engineering technology stack or all the roles because it has this challenge of going horizontal, trying to be as vertical as possible, managing managers and managing performance and again focus on impact. So I think the way my mindset changed over time is I needed to let go some of my biggest passions when I used to code and I used to go deeper into little details and very specific stacks and go more horizontal, but keep myself really up to date with things so I can go and speak to my teams their language and help them move the needle with what they do and still be someone who can bring a vision that everyone can stand behind. So it's a completely different game over time, but it's organic. You cannot just hop on overnight into a new role like this and just expect yourself to be successful. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of education. You need to keep up with everything that is happening as much as you can, obviously, and then help your team execute and find the gaps in your own set of skills, technical and non-technical skills, to be the best VP of engineering you can to help your team proceed.
So if I have to ask about one of the hardest things for you when you had to change yourself and you moved into this role, what was it?
I think definitely going very horizontal because I think when I turned more into senior leadership positions in engineering management, I found myself very quickly into completely outside of my comfort zone, right? Like I used to do, I started with gaming, obviously, that was my area of expertise. And then I learned mobile, which was a passion of mine. And then that was my space. I was very comfortable there. I can do anything. I can be very efficient and I can lead a team to deliver on these areas. But then overnight, you take over, web development and backend technologies and then cloud native, distribution systems. So overnight, you find yourself completely outside of the zone where you're very comfortable and your team is looking up for you to guide sometimes, right? And it's very hard for you to do any of that if you cannot be able to speak the language, to catch up with these technologies, to be someone people can stand behind in terms of like trust, in terms of guidance. So that's the moment where I felt like, oh, this is not a thing I can keep doing the same way I used to do other things before. Now I need to get myself into continuous learning more proactively, even ahead, going a little bit ahead of my initial plans and managing teams. So very quickly I turn on, okay, what is web development? What are the key areas and components and technology stacks? How can I manage a team that does that? How can I learn backend very quickly? How can I learn infrastructure and data and then QA and security and all of that? So as you go into these roles, again, your scope is going to grow, significantly, and you need to catch up with these technologies. Again, to a certain level of depth. I cannot go as deep as I went into mobile and into other technologies I was very hands-on in, but you need to have that level of depth that is good enough to drive these teams to really be a source of trust and confidence, and people can stand with you as a leader. And again, be productive and perform.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense actually. But the thing is, like, when you are in that dilemma that how whether you should go vertically, like you deep into the topic, or you have a responsibility to like go horizontal as well. How do you take that call? Okay, this is where I have to stop, and like this is how I would be guiding my team. Because when you're talking to technologists, and specifically in your case, you were coming from mobile and then a gaming background, and then you took up other technologies. Anyone who is expecting some guidance there would be much deeper into that technology. So, what would be that situation? Let's say I am that person who is technically probably spent 3 4 years already in web development, and you have come in as a VP, and you're trying to have a conversation with me and telling me that okay, this is how you should be taking up things. Don't you think that I would be the person who already knows more hands on than you? And then in that situation, how could you guide me better?
Well, that's where a mix of soft skills and hard skills get into the game, and that's where you can get to into VP of engineering role, is to be smart and socially capable of navigating these situations, right? So first of all, on the hard skills, as I said, you need to go and learn the minimum to be able to speak the language. You cannot go to, again, backend engineers and start telling them things and telling them stories about your front end engineering background. It doesn't work. So you need to get to a certain level of learning and efficiency in the stack and the technology to be able to at least speak at a high level. And then the other thing is where the soft skills get into the game. You need to be verbal. You need to be very clear about your level of expertise. You need to highlight your team members as the experts and create this environment of collaboration where you come as a leader, but they are the expert in the field. And
Got
together you can move the needle. Together you can make things happen. So build that kind of trust relationship that is based on their competence in your leadership, and together you can really get things in motion. It's very hard for someone who doesn't have the strong IC technical hands-on background um, in a specific stack to come and lead them from a technical perspective purely with their own leadership. And that's in another language, that's not a good leadership framework or management style if you just come in and guide the whole team to do what you want them to do. So that's where, again, your soft skills get into the play, where you come in and say, okay, what's the vision here? What's the plan? What you have been going through? What are the challenges? And then over time, as you get more mature and more experienced as a leader, you'll find a way. You'll find a way to make it work. But again, I think you need to really get your ego outside of the room, get and talk to these individuals, make sure they understand you are here to support them and guide them from a leadership perspective, but they are still the expert in the fields, and you count on them and give them space to experiment, give them space to own and lead and drive things. And that's what leads to good collaboration between the leaders and the team behind.
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So, moving on to the part where we talk about managing the teams, making them more efficient, making them more productive. What do you think? Is there a framework that fits for everyone? Do you follow a framework to improve the overall engineering productivity, developer productivity in your teams?
Honestly, this is a very kind of hard question, right? There is no pattern, there is no formula, one size fits all here for performance and for productivity. As a leader, you need to get into learning what your team is about, what the challenges they are facing, what kind of combination of skills, again, hard and soft skills you have in the team, to figure out what is missing and how can you address this. But there's still like, even if this is not like there is no specific framework, I personally have been following a framework that helped me a lot in my journey. This is a twist of David H. Pink kind of autonomous team or the art of mastery based on his book Drive. It's by someone called, I think, John Ferguson Smart. And it's a combination of three things: shared understanding, which is mainly making sure that everyone in your team has the same understanding of what you are trying to do, what is the vision, and get that level of alignment. Because sometimes teams cannot perform if they don't have the same definition of something. Like if you want to build a feature and two parts of your team or have this different understanding of that feature, that's not going to lead to a highly performant outcome. So shared understanding is key, and sometimes we miss this as leaders. We kind of delegate this to other people or other departments like product and project management. Say, okay, well, you define what is the statement and let the team work on it. But as an engineering leader, you need to make sure your team has that same alignment. The second thing is I talked about this earlier, is trust. I think trust is, again, really underrated when it comes to engineering leadership, and we focus on technical and like this and that. But to build the value of trust in your team, to make sure, again, what I said earlier, talk to your team and tell them you are the expert. I'm here to help you get the best out of your expertise. And then they should trust you also as a leader, as someone who can really help them navigate these things, not worry about the external noise and focus on what they need to deliver. And this leads to peak performance, which hopefully we can get to at some point. The third part of this is competence. And this is mainly about hard skills, which are, very related to how efficient they can be at the stack and the technology they're working on and all of that. So it's more about the deep knowledge. So now defining shared understanding, trust, and competence, you have overlap between these things. Shared understanding and trust gives flexibility. So if you and your team members have the exact same understanding and you trust them, you can give your team the flexibility to do whatever they want. They work in their own way, the best way that works for them, and own and kind of drive a higher level of ownership and use their own better judgment to get to the delivery. And flexibility works a lot to improve performance. So if you give people the flexibility they need, they can be very successful. The overlap between trust and competence provide excellence, meaning that if you trust them and they have the right skills, they will deliver the best outcome from a technology perspective. They will build the best code they can because they trust their own frameworks and practices. Obviously, you need, as a leader, you need to make sure that it's all aligned across the teams and not based on individuals. And then last
Right.
overlap is between shared understanding and competence. You get the focus. So if they have the skills and they have a clear understanding, they can be very focused on delivering exactly the right desired outcome you have for the team. So this is the framework I use. It's very kind of very vague from distance, but when you start using it and really try to put together some specific goals and expectations to get higher on all of these, you get the center of all of these overlap, which is a very highly autonomous team that master their technology and the work they do. And again, they can deliver the highest impact possible. So that's one of the frameworks. Obviously, there are more, but that's one that really resonated with me. I have the books. I have the TED. I watched the TED talk from David H. Pink, which is really great. I recommend it to everyone.
Perfect. I think shared knowledge, competence,
Trust.
flexibility, trust. Like when you are putting it out there as a framework, I'm sure there are some specific processes, there are some specific things that you are doing to ensure everything falls into place. So, can you just give like one example that is most impactful in implementing each of these pieces? Like one thing that impacts a lot you are practicing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And again, there was one framework, but there is a very popular framework, PPT, right? Like people, process, and technology. These are key factors influencing engineering productivity, and you need to work on them. The one focused on people has two subparts, which are the individual of part of people, and then there's this team. So you need to make sure for the individual factors you work on skills and experience and growth development. You need to make sure people have the motivation, engagement, work-life balance, and all of that. And for the team, you need to focus on communication, collaboration, team dynamics. So one good example is I worked at companies where they were very distributed teams, including contractors, engineering teams. There are some in-house engineering, there are contractors engineering. The in-house are distributed, the contractors are distributed. When I joined this company, people were naming the other parties but the name of the contractor, like the company, like, oh, this part of the software is like owned by this, and that part is owned by us, the in-house engineers based in the US, as an example. And I was so confused because for me, an engineering team is a one engineering team, even if it's distributed. Like these boundaries are just geo-based boundaries. They cannot be just also deep into the engineering process in work. So what I did is I made sure like all these kind of boundaries are removed, virtual boundaries are removed. Engineering team is aligned. They use the same framework, they use the same language, they use even at some point the same technology stacks as much as possible by aligning on design patterns, building SDKs, building shared components. And that kind of created more dynamics between these teams that got them to deliver higher productivity and higher impactful software. Because at the beginning, again, there was like every team was delivering their own standards, their own patterns, even their own stacks. Like some part was written in Python, the other part was in Node, the other part is in Go. they were just serving each other in a handoff process. Like, oh, you want this? Here you go. You have this service build and it does this, and you have an API. But as soon as as a manager, I needed to put resources in different teams and focus on one areas. When I had to manage that mobility of the engineers, they were going into a new piece of software saying like, I'm not familiar with this stack. And I'm not even familiar, even if I'm familiar with the stack, I'm not familiar with the design patterns that are in this stack, in this piece of software. And for me, that was a challenge. So one big part we forget about improving productivity is making sure from a technology perspective, the tools, the stack, the design patterns are aligned as much as possible. You introduce new systems like CI/CDs and observability to make sure things are moving along really quickly. And then the second part of this is, as you said earlier, is the process, like what methodology you have, what kind of channels to communicate, how efficient is your workflow as a team, and what kind of practices you have introduced to your teams. And these practices should be as aligned as possible across everyone, including, distributed teams to achieve higher performance and higher productivity in general. That was one of the biggest learning I had when my teams started scaling up and also going more distributed from a geo-based location, ensuring that it's not just a handoff process between software engineers. It was more about alignment. And I think that solution can scale with the scale of the problem as well.
Makes sense. Perfect. Perfect. I think with that, I would like to know some of your initiatives that you would have worked in the last year, or must be planning a few more initiatives this year to actually impact your engineering productivity. Is there something that was challenging last year for you? You accomplished something out of it, or still working on that?
Yeah. So one of the biggest area I focus on is this, again, individual and team factors, the people side of things, right? Again, technology, we talked about this enough, in my opinion, process as well. But the people side of things could be tricky. And it takes a lot of time and experience to get to a place where you can have, as a leader, as an engineering leader, you can have an impact on the people. So some of the biggest initiatives I work on is ensuring on the individual side of things, we have a continuous learning development of skills for everyone on the team, no matter what level they're in. Even if you're the most highly senior engineer, principal, and architect level, there's still something for you to learn. There's a new area to discover in engineering and software and hands-on work, but also maybe in some other soft skills. So providing resources, time, and availability to go and explore different areas that definitely could be driven by their own passion. And that's another framework I want to bring, which is something going back to the first question, the story of my childhood and all of that. I was passionate about video games and I wanted to work in that space because I think when people work on their passion, they can really break the limits of what's possible. So that's something I always bring to my work. And I get to my team and I say, let's work together on aligning on where you want to be next and how can we achieve that. And I never bring my own pattern of growth and maybe success and say, oh, like I go to a director of engineering and say, if you want to be a VP of engineering, this is what you need to do based on what I did. No, everyone is different. Every path and journey is different. And what I do is I work with them to define their own definition, to get to their own definition of success. And I say, what makes you successful? What makes you happy in working on things that you're very excited about? What makes you more motivated and engaged? So the other tool or framework I use is really collaborate with individual and teams to identify their own definition of success. And then I add to it some spices, I would say, from my own recipe and from my own experience as a leader to just kind of tweak it a little bit. But most of the time, that's what I focus on is like, tell me exactly where you see yourself. What's your passion about? And this could be completely like 180 degrees. It could be doing like software engineering on the back end, and they want to go into AI. And I help them to transition there, again, over time. And I think that's the key. And I think, and I hope I was able to turn around a lot of people in getting into higher productivity and performance because of this, because I never go to someone and say, you need to do this. To be successful, you need to follow this path. I always try to listen and get their own definition of success and work with them through this, and then say, okay, based on everything you said, based on your passion, based on your motivation and where you want to be, and with my own tweaks, this is what we need to do. and I will do follow-ups with you, and we'll work together to achieve that. This is something, again, if you talk to anyone I worked with in the previous companies or Betterworks today, this is something that resonates really well with people. They recognize as a working, efficient way to get better over time. And when you achieve this on the individual level, obviously your teams in general will be impacted, and you'll create some sort of like leadership and ownership and people driving things. And everyone is pushing the boundaries of what you can do as an engineering team in general. And it has been very efficient. And for me as an engineering leader, that's where I get my rewarding experience. This is where I feel I had an impact. And this is where I was able sometimes, again, to turn around completely low performance into high performance.
But I think in this case, as much as I agree to what you're saying, really resonates. And in fact, that could be true for any department, like any leader enabling team members in the direction where they are passionate about would be something that would energize the whole team. But still, I feel that there is a lot of complication that gets added because at the end of the day, we are humans. We have changing desires, changing passions, and then a lot of things get complex. So while you implement this framework in an engineering team, what kind of challenges you have seen? Is there sometimes some kind of a shortage of a particular skill set in the team because a lot of people are more passionate about doing the back end and you have less front end engineers, or maybe vice versa? So there could be a like lot of such complications there. So any
Yeah.
challenges that you've seen while implementing these things?
Absolutely. I mean, you said there are some complications and challenges, but there's a lot. I mean, there are a lot of complications and challenges when you work as an engineering leader. This is, again, as I said earlier, some people call it the most difficult position to be in because you're managing different things. Again, we talked about people, process, and technology. We talked about hard and soft skills, but on this side, when you're trying to implement something like this, some of the examples I can bring up here to the conversation are the initiatives you have running, maybe some of the greatest initiatives that you have happening in the engineering team, like at Betterworks as an example, we have been building generative AI, enhanced features and bringing this great technologies. We have been kind of refactoring, revamping some of our technologies to build newer, better systems. And but you still have the other old legacy systems. You have things are running in production that you need to maintain. You have incidents to manage and stuff like that. And sometimes you have, resources, people, teams are watching other teams and other people doing other exciting stuff, and they are still like doing the old stuff. And as an engineering leader, your job is to make sure that there's a good dynamic, there's a good culture of, again, trust and shared understanding that these things are happening to everyone at the same time. It's just that it takes a little bit more time in process and priorities to get there. So it's part of that, again, earlier when I talked about the own definition of success, is to really know where everyone is eager to be doing as, again, an individual. And then when you talk to the team in general, you need to see what you listen to their feedback and understand their point of view. So sometimes some teams will say, okay, well, we have been coding in this part of the software for like 3 or 4 years now, and nothing is moving too much. Versus other teams where like every quarter they have a new feature, they have great stuff, it's being communicated and published, and it gets a lot of like credits and all of that. So you need to make sure you have the right process in your team to be able to rotate the projects, to rotate the excitement, to get people to, again, own and lead, to experiment. So some of the initiatives you do are always, hackathons, give people time to just do something completely different from what they do on a daily basis. So that will, trigger the creativity of everyone, the passion again, and you can see where everyone's mind is at and what they want to do. So again, it's a little bit tricky. It's not that easy. It's not like, oh, everyone will be doing this and then 6 months later you'll be doing something more fun. But that's where, again, your presence as an engineering leader is so important. Your vision is so important. You need people to have your teams behind you in terms of vision and trust that it's going to happen in that kind of way of rotation and mobility, and everyone will be impacted. So absolutely, it's one of these challenges you see, like people trying to get into more exciting projects while you have some support. One other thing you need to do as a leader is to ensure these kind of single point of failures, and you cannot afford to have one person or one team that is just expert, very deeply expert in one area. And it creates this environment where you are afraid of two things: these team or these individuals leaving and creating a gap in knowledge, or these people being stuck in that knowledge and cannot afford to do anything else, even if they are passionate about it, or they are bored of that. They have been building this service for too long, they want to experiment something else, but you cannot let them go because you say you're the only expert. So my job is ensure that it's knowledge transfer happening, people getting into new systems, delegate a little bit, and offer everyone an option to get out and do something else that are excited about. It's a dance, right? It's a push and pull. You need
Yeah.
to get into understanding how things work and be involved a little bit deeper to be more effective as an engineering leader.
I think the core of it lies in that you have to be a good listener, not like exactly listening, but being more empathetic and understanding of what everyone needs and the situation needs, and try to accommodate every time, because it's gonna be dynamic, it's gonna change. You just have to keep adjusting, keep tweaking, calibrating according to that. So it totally
Yeah.
makes sense.
And
Thanks, thanks for sharing.
the funny part is a lot of this I learned while playing video games. That's gonna connect to the first question you asked. When you play a video game, you're a guild master of like 200, 300 people, and you go and do these raids and experiences, and then you have loot to share, and you need to make decisions, and everyone wants something. Yeah, you kind of build up some experience early on about people dynamics, about making sure how you make people happy and how you navigate conflicts in opinions. And sometimes when you have very senior people, also you have a clash of opinions. So how would you navigate that? How would you make sure they can work in an environment where everyone has a strong opinion about things? So yeah, a lot of this I learned early on in my journey before even I get into engineering, while playing video games and dealing with people, which is really great.
Cool. I think that's on the people part, and I think that was really, really insightful. I think we should have some, instead of books, have the list of games one should play early on in their life to be yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's yeah.
yeah. So moving on from people, like you mentioned about technology, right? What happened in 2024, and or you're planning for 2025 in technology to make your teams even more efficient?
Yeah, I would say a few things. Focus on technology. There are, I would say, three big pillars. One of them is really addressing poor designs, poor patterns in your software. We underestimate this again as under think about it as a problem that is impacting productivity and performance. When engineers are dealing with older legacy software that has poor designs, it takes time. It introduces more bugs. No matter how skilled they are, it's challenging. So really, as an engineering leader, you need to always make sure there's time to recover, time to pay back technical debt, time to go back and redesign, refactor, and reinvent a little bit your software stack to get people to enjoy newer, more modern architecture that will lead to higher performance and productivity. Things can happen fast when you have the right patterns that are more accurate and more modern today. Again, this is something I do on a you know frequently basis at Betterworks, and before. One of my key areas of focus as an engineering leader is to help teams pay back technical debt, build better software so they can be more productive. A second
Yeah.
thing is investing, I would say, investing in tooling and platforming. I mean, we always forget about platform engineering as a pillar to software engineering in general, but being able to build the right continuous integration, continuous delivery system, CI/CD, have proper observability in place to get all these logging and monitoring and alerts you need to be able to know and quickly debug and figure out things. It helps a lot, and it makes sure it creates a good level of confidence of the team in terms of the quality of the code. And again, it's a lot of things are happening most recently, and this is where I'm going into a third kind of component that is impacting performance and productivity from a technical perspective is generative AI. And we have seen over the last 2 years now the development of these copilots, the coding assistants. And it's true, it's not fully there, it's not fully efficient so far, but it's very effective to get a certain level of delegation to AI when it comes to, like, as an example, writing tests for functions you have, for helping you optimize some of the code base, even migrate from a stack to another. So it's becoming a powerful tool capable of learning from your stack and your software, learning over time as well, adapting, and even solving some problems and some real problems at some point. As a very good example at Betterworks today, we have a top-down approach to adopting generative AI. Everyone at the company is really encouraged and asked to leverage generative AI in their own areas of expertise. And for engineering in particular, we ask everyone to use these co-pilots and coding assistants to leverage the new IDs coming up out there to experiment and really to bring use case and say, okay, I have been using this to achieve this thing. I think there are very key areas. Again, PR, pull request work and improvements, writing tests, and even infrastructure in the future. It seems like infrastructure could have a big area of impact when AI. It helps optimize infrastructure, not to build everything from scratch on behalf of people. I don't think AI will replace software engineers, honestly, but it will make them better software engineers capable of achieving way more, be more productive and more performant. And I think that's the goal.
Makes sense. I think when you said redesigning and taking up the new patterns, getting rid of the old ones, or if it's about, let's say, rewriting code pieces, generative AI is actually putting in as a fundamental piece everywhere, right? And there could be a lot of use cases. There are a lot of startups. There are a lot of tools out there. But according to you, while you were researching that which areas should be now on higher priority from an engineering standpoint, and AI could really be leveraged, I think you would have first checked this tool has evolved in this area, and this could be a right fit to be used right now. Like you mentioned about co-pilots, right? It can write a better level of code and it can actually be integrated. We can try new IDs to ensure that we have better code, faster code in place. Are there any specific tools? I mean, if you're comfortable sharing names or telling us what could work better for other teams as well, other engineering leaders, other engineering teams outside out there. Uh, any examples or anything that you found very interesting?
I mean, the number one tool is obviously GitHub Copilot. A lot of teams today are on GitHub anyway, so it's very well embedded into the system, and a lot of plugins for all the IDs out there. So I think it's the first one that comes to mind. Also, now they released a free license tier
Yeah.
that will help a lot of people get into it. So I think that's the no-brainer. But for me, I will go a little bit off a tangent here and say that one of the best ways to experiment with the Gen AI as a software engineer could be to run Gen AI locally on your machines, which are things we can do today. And personally, even as an engineering leader, not being very hands on today, I found out that something like a combination of Olama, which helps you run systems, I mean LLMs locally, and open source models out there like the Llama 3 models or the Mistral models, you can have a local assistant to do a lot of things, including code assistant and writing code and refactoring all of that. And if you add to that some IDEs like Cursor, now you can use your IDE connected to your own LLM. That again, if you have the level of experience to maybe go and fine tune it over time, and you leverage Olama to also include, do some RAG and bring some more code and bring some documentations to think and very good examples on how you do tests as an example, it could be a very strong tool for more experienced engineers. And I think one of the biggest areas Gen AI would have an impact is testing. I think the testing pyramid has always been to fully automate. The ambition is to automate as much as possible. And I think with Gen AI, there will be more use cases to just do that. If you leverage generative AI to write tests, I think you will have a bigger, better suite of tools to ensure that your quality of code is meeting a certain level to test for edge cases you didn't think about when you were writing code. So I think testing is one area. The other area would be in general research, honestly, in learning. As a software engineer, if you have a Copilot or just any LLM or chat-based LLM like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, you can go and really, learn about things faster. Yes, it does a lot of things for you. Like as an example, you can copy paste a function, say, hey, can you optimize this? The key if you're leveraging generative AI is learning, is not to delegate. I mean, some people might think, "Oh, I don't have to worry about this. I'm gonna write random code, but then the Gen AI will optimize it for me." The key is for you to learn from that optimization that was offered to you. And we should not forget, the LLMs are not perfect, and you can think about them as another software engineer, maybe more experienced for sure, but an engineer who can make mistakes. So it's your part to be really curious and critical about the outcome you get from Gen AI to make sure you're at the same time leveraging the tool to learn, to grow, and to have a bigger impact and be more productive.
Yeah, I think these are some of the hard truths about AI code assistants. But lately, I've been following a few people and on LinkedIn, and I have seen different opinions on how Copilot has actually helped in improving the code writing speed or in general the quality, there is a mixed opinion. And in such situations, I think any engineering org which is implementing such technology would want to have a clarity on whether it is working out for them or not. And it's completely possible that it works out for some companies and it doesn't for some. In your case, do you like measure specific things when you, let's say, implement a technology or you implement a new process just to like improve productivity? Is there something that you specifically look at while implementing those at the beginning and the end to ensure like, okay, if this is working out or not?
Yeah, I mean, some things are measurable, some things are not measurable, honestly. And this is a known, challenge is to measure the unmeasurable, to find out where this technology is having impact without having tangible metrics to measure. And you need to use proxies based on that. You need to collect feedback. You need to get some sort of an assessment of how you feel about your own productivity as an engineer using these tools. So we do that. Every once in a while, again, we have a very specific internal strategy and vision that is driven by, that is focused on using and leveraging generative AI in every area of the business. And one of them is software engineering. And when we started, one of the very good use cases, again, was QA and writing tests. And we have been measuring how much time it takes, I would say, software development and tests to write a suite of tests for a new piece of code. We try to compare both, ways. The old ways, which is mainly kind of manual, like let's look at this, let's write all the tests that are needed or define the test suite for these. And then the other way is QA. You share the QA, the concept, the requirements, the acceptance criteria, and then you expect it to generate for you the test. And we have noticed that the time that takes an engineer, a software development engineering test, to get to the desired outcome is way more significant. I don't have exact percentages or numbers, but it's like it takes 20% time versus 100% to just achieve the whole test suite. So for this area of like bringing generative AI, it's good. But again, we should not forget that these tests has to be reviewed. The human should be in the loop. I don't believe in a lot of things to be fully automated and you don't have to worry about and you don't have to look back. But I also, on another end, I really believe that Gen AI will become table stakes in software engineering. The same way we had these great IDEs developing over time, the same way we had autocomplete for code, the same way we had process and tools to improve our quality of code, the same way we had patterns and things. I think Gen AI will become that thing that we all use. We all have. It's common knowledge. And it's going to be a shift in the way we work as software engineers. We used to use a lot of Stack Overflow and go and search and do this and do that. All that will be replaced now in your own environment, in the work, in the flow of work, and you will have all the answers you need. I don't think it will take over software engineering 100%, and like you don't have to write anything. And you hear and you see this in LinkedIn, as you said. You hear like, oh, this was developed. I think these are, as of today, these are naive, thinking about software engineering. You can build a proof of concept, you can build some basic one single feature aspects, but as you get to build enterprise, distributed systems, this doesn't scale to that level. But the technology is evolving and Gen AI is doing its best to get there. And we're here for it. We're here to support that and we're here to learn it and use it. But again, we all go back to the same saying of like a software engineer who's leveraging generative AI will be more productive and efficient than a software engineer who does it.
Makes sense. All right. I think with that, we come to the end of this episode. I could continue talking to you. It's super, super exciting and insightful to hear all the things that you have been doing. I think you are a really accomplished engineering leader. It is very evident from what you're saying, what you're doing at your organization. It is very difficult to be in this overwhelming position. It looks like that it is very overwhelming. So any piece of advice to all the other engineering leaders who are listening to you, how to keep that sanity in place while managing this whole chaos?
I think it's a matter of, again, going in circles here, but it's a passion, right? I think you need to have the level of passion to be able to navigate this role. And the passion is what keeps you pushing the boundaries and making things that are complex and hard and challenging look easy and look fun and enjoyable, right? Some part of my work are hard and tough, but I honestly enjoy them. And I go through them with a positive attitude. It's like, this is a tough conversation I need to have. This is a I'm going to bring my principal engineers, we're going to talk about something, and I know everyone will have an opinion, but you know what? We need to leave this meeting with a decision. And you need to have the passion to be able to navigate these complexities, being someone who is very driven about solving problems, navigating people dynamics, passionate about technology, obviously, and have a good mindset of getting to the finish line. So you have been asking about a lot of frameworks. Another frameworks, which again, very popular one, is get things done, GTD. As an engineering leader, a VP of engineering, you need to get things done. That's your job. So you need to be passionate about that, get to the finish line. So it's a lot of things here and there. I don't recommend engineering leadership in general for people who are very passionate about just pure technical things, people who are very passionate about coding. It's going to be very hard for them to detach from coding and the technology aspect and get into navigating these things. So when you get to this level, you focus about different things from just the perfect code that you ever write, and it's more about the perfect outcome you can get out of the resources you have and have an impact. I use this word a lot. I think engineering leaders are all about impact and all about getting the best resources or the best outcomes from the resources they have, and even minimize our resources, obviously time and money in this case. So it's not easy, but if you have the passion, you can make things happen, and you can turn these complex things into fun challenges to have and solve them, and really get that rewarding experience at the end where you know what, I came here, that was a big challenge, that was a big problem, I helped the team solve it, let's move on to the next big thing. And I think that's my advice to people who are looking to become engineering leaders.
Perfect. On the point. All right, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And we would love to have you again on the episode for sure sometime again and talk more in depth what you're doing, how you're leading teams.
Thank you again. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on your podcast.